My name is Michelle. I'm a model and actress from Ipswich. I am a Christian by birth, but not a practicing one. I'm more of a spiritual person.
My name is Yavin Liberatus Fuzi Akpadono. I'm a politics student from King's College London, and in my spare time I train as an amateur boxer. In terms of my religious beliefs, I would class myself as an agnostic individual.
Muslim culture as a whole was very alien to me prior to taking part in this documentary. So I most definitely had no idea who Hussein was, or why so many people were engaged in remembrance for his death.
I do have a lot of Muslim friends, and we do debate and discuss religion actively. However, I knew next to nothing about Hussein and was very much looking forward to delving deeper into an aspect of Islam that is not known to many.
At first, I was slightly sceptical and nervous about becoming involved with this project. I hadn't had a lot of exposure to the Muslim faith growing up, so I didn't really know what to expect. Nevertheless, I convinced myself to go in with an open mind.
Islam as a religion has been subject to a lot of scrutiny over the last few years, so I was eager to enhance my understanding of it. And what better way than to engage with the members of this faith during a sacred time of the Islamic calendar.
For centuries, Hussein, son of Ali and the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has acted as a symbol of hope and bravery for millions across the globe. A figure revered by Muslims for his stand against injustice and subservience to God. Annually, Muslims gather in their religious centers to perform mourning rituals and acts of devotion to remember Hussein and his supreme sacrifice. Culture has played a significant role in influencing the way in which Hussein is mourned in each community. It is not a command enshrined within the law of Islam, and therefore the methods of commemoration adopted by various communities have evolved over time. How have these rituals been carried out and continued amid Western society? And more importantly, how does the wider community perceive the traditional commemoration of Hussein? We follow two individuals from outside the Muslim faith to observe their first-hand experience of the first 10 days of the mourning period. The month of Muharram is the first month of the lunar calendar, and it is the month in which Hussein was killed. Many women will hold private events for mourning during this month, and adopt a traditional dress code in black to symbolize their mark of grief. They recite rhythmic eulogies in Arabic and beat their chest and head to the notes of the poems.
There were mostly Iraqi and Muslim women there. There was lots of grief in the room, and it was very difficult to understand at first. I couldn't understand why they were so upset and why they was crying. But it soon became apparent that lots of these women had lost loved ones in the past during the war, that, you know, their fathers, brothers, family members. So then I could understand the grief.
I can honestly say I've not experienced that before. It was almost a little bit surreal. Everybody was obviously all the same. They was all very friendly. But there was a lot of sadness in people's faces, I could see that. So walk in, because I haven't been or experienced anything like this before, I didn't actually feel nervous, maybe because I have my head covering. But all in all, it was a nice feeling. It was a real feeling of togetherness, a lot of love and good energy in the room, although it is a period of mourning. It's just everybody coming together, which I feel is really important.
Devoted young Muslims who have grown up in the UK have adapted events of commemorations in ways they can understand them better, and therefore organise private events in English inviting friends and colleagues to share those somber days.
Immediately when I arrived, I felt a sense of brotherhood, and as I inquired further, I understood that this was a private event where the person who was hosting it had invited his close friends and family so that they could get together and share in the story of Hussein.
But he had a lot of love and inclination towards Ahlul Bayt.
The Imam was telling a story about the importance of knowing your Imam. And even though there was a lot of Arabic terminology used, which made it a bit harder for me to understand, by the intensity in his voice that was rising, I could tell that this was an important story that resonated with a lot of people. And you could tell that the emotion in the room was very heightened, especially towards the end, but just by watching the people's reactions, etc. And it was quite enjoyable to be in that presence, to feel the power that they were feeling at the same time.
Even if you die, you will be granted access to leave your grave and join them.
صعب خويا الفراق وعلي مهان النار بثيابي تشب حق عاتب وانت حب النار بثيابي تشب جفني هاميل يا ابو فاضل.
At the end of the service, somebody stood up and recited a piece of poetry in Arabic, and it was very beautiful. Again, even though I did not understand particularly what was being said, you could tell by the energy and the cadence in his voice that what was being said was it was quite an emotional story. And also you could, if you looked around the room, you could tell by other people's reactions how it was resonating with them and how it was making them feel. It was a very deep emotion that he was provoking in them with those words. And following from that, people began to beat their chest. And then once one person started, it kind of spread, and more people were doing it around the room. And again, it was all very rhythmic, and it was in time with the words. And then that became the only thing that was in the room, and that was something quite profound. I hadn't seen that anywhere before. So it was an interesting way to, especially as I was there, I was able to get somebody to translate the story that the person had told. And it was an interesting reaction to the story that had been told. It's not something that I had seen before. However, you could tell again that this is something that people were doing out of passion, and this was their way of commemorating that particular event. So it was there were many raw emotions in the room, but it was an interesting way to see them be expressed.
Hussein as a personality that transcends time and space. We can have a better opportunity to understand Hussein from a multitude of perspectives. But if you make Hussein someone that is basically confined to one particular place, or one particular space, or one particular line of thought, then we have definitely missed the very heart and spirit of his mission.
Hussein's sacrifice was a cry to support the weak and vulnerable, to give those that have lost their rights hope again. This indeed has been adopted by the organisation Who is Hussein, who organise weekly food donation drives for the homeless people in central London.
When I first arrived at the homeless drive, I was so surprised by how many people were actually there, the homeless people. There was so many. I was also very surprised by how many volunteers had turned up. All of these people had come here to make a difference to these people's lives. There were nurses there was dental hygienists. They was all on hand to help and offer their services to the homeless.
There is a dentist. Have you been inside to have your teeth checked? Sorry? Have you been inside? You can go and have a checkup. Go to this dentist. No?
I don't have.
They can send you somewhere to get this done, put your tooth back in perhaps, have a checkup. Not just here right now, but they can give you some information of a dentist. If you go in there and have a checkup, they'll let you know where to go.
There was even a dental nurse there who was actually showing the homeless people how to brush their teeth correctly. They was also handing out food, drinks and blankets. And it was a really beautiful experience of coming together and helping so many people, these unfortunate people.
So what do you get out of all of this, helping people? Because it clearly suits you. You're actually blossoming. It's like you're thriving off it.
It's just like, for me, it's just following Imam Hussein's legacy.
Yes.
And it's not just, what kind of character was he,
No, yes.
Such an amazing character to be inspired by. And for me, it's his character traits that stick out. How can I use my skills, being inspired by Hussein, how can I use my skills and give back?
I'm surprised by the amount of homeless people that there are here, and certainly by the volunteers and the organisation. A few of the homeless people made references that it's very similar to Jesus Christ. The teachings is very similar, the Muslims, and it's just completely struck me just by how much love, if anything, and the teachings, and how much people really do work and believe in Hussein's message and teachings. There's certainly no trouble. There's no confrontations. It's just about everybody wanting to help each other, and I think that's how it should be in life, really.
A group of young people have set up a blood donation campaign in the name of Hussein. This campaign is run throughout the year, but the efforts are intensified during Muharram.
So over the 10 days of Muharram, I was fortunate enough to witness different ways that people commemorate Imam Hussein. And now I'm here at the Blood Donation Center. You guys have done an amazing job. It's been going on for 10 years. So I was wondering why you've chosen this particular way to commemorate Imam Hussein and his teachings.
Obviously it started with Imam Hussein's blood donation, and we've done it under his name, and it peaks during the Muharram season purely because of his teachings. Because what he taught us during Karbala and during the day of Ashura, during the whole battle, and through his martyrdom and his life, is that a small sacrifice can go a very long way. This is a very small way that we can implement a small change and implement his teachings and values into our life. We may not have the same scenario that there was 1400 years ago, but his teachings and his life are not limited to one time constraint, and his teachings are limited to just one person, not Muslims. It's for everybody to hear.
I'm a non-Muslim, but I've come to doing a social experiment to understand more about Imam Hussein, his story, Muharram, etc. So I found out that different people commemorate his life and the situation that happened to him in different ways. So what has made it that you've come to, that you found that giving blood is the way that you want to commemorate him, or one of the ways that you want to commemorate him?
Cause where we can save lives, just as Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, wanted to save people's lives in terms of guidance. This is a different way of saving someone's life, but it's a similar message.
My name is Sharon. I work for the marketing team from NHS Blood and Transplant, and I'm here to observe a session today, see how it's going.
How do you feel that this one differs, or does it differ to typical blood transfusion days or blood donation days?
Well, so it's in a place of worship, so that's a total change for donors who are coming in. It's a unique experience, and it's great to learn about something different when you come and donate as well.
Here I'm witnessing people are actively giving back something to society. From what I can see, the people have adapted the message of Hussein from 1,400 years ago to a modern day situation, a situation in which in the UK there's only 3% of ethnic minorities are currently donating blood. So this is a way that the Imam Hussein blood donation campaign have come. They've thought of an idea in a way that they can bring the community together to really give the message, to bring the message of Hussein into the 21st century and address this problem. Having spoken to one of the blood donors and one of the organizers, this has definitely shone through. One of the blood donor that I spoke to, he said that this is the third time that he's given blood through the Imam Hussein blood donation campaign. And he said that it's because it touched him in quite a profound and personal way, and he thinks that this is the best way that he can come out here and commemorate it.
Muslims feel indebted to Hussein for his sacrifice, and so many will give up their time and money to pay tribute to him. Everyone does so in their own way, and collectively it becomes a massive offering and love. Food is normally offered at the end of commemoration programs during the mourning period. Volunteers line up in large numbers just so they can say, "We served his cause."
What is it that Imam Hussein has done personally for you that's made you come and give your time in this way?
Look, Imam Hussein sacrificed a lot when, back like about over 1400 years ago. He even sacrificed his 6-month-year-old baby. Me volunteering for a couple of hours a day, that's nothing comparing to what he sacrificed from the poor.
There are no real ways of dealing with loss, but as humans we continue to find ways to cope. Over the years, artists and photographers have turned to their work to address feelings of anger, confusion, fear, sadness, hope and love. Michelle and Yavin have come to an art gallery in London, set up for the first 10 days of Muharram, so they can observe the collaborative work of artists and photographers. It is important that Michelle understands the historical context behind the death of Hussein, and so we arranged for her to meet Zahra Al-Alawi, who is a public speaker and television presenter.
A few days after the battle, Yazid could be seen sat comfortably on his throne holding a long wooden stick which he used to jab at Imam Hussein's head, which was mounted decoratively beside him. The same head that belonged to a man the Holy Prophet cherished and adored. So much love did the Prophet have for his grandson that he had given him the prestigious title of leader of the youth of paradise. And yet Yazid had the audacity to beat the same face the Prophet kissed.
The Prophet was an individual which everyone respected, who brought Islam to the world, yet after his death there was corruption that took place after him, and eventually the Battle of Karbala is when Hussein was martyred and killed. And there's a lot of incidents that happened during battle which really showed that Imam Hussein pleaded to them many times. For example, there was one narration that I remember, and he said he had a 6-month-old baby, and the narration said that it was so thirsty that, you know, when a child cries for water, there was no sound when he was crying, he would just open his mouth. He took him to the battle so you could see the army in front of him, and he took the child and he said, if you want me, then come to me, but this is a child, you know, if you have any ounce of sympathy for any human being, this is a 6-month-old baby and he wants water. If you don't trust me, then you come take the child and just feed him a drop of water and give him back. There was a commandment that said fire the arrow, and they fired the arrow and they hit the arrow of the infant baby, and that really kind of hit the heart of Imam Hussein, because it's his child, it's a baby, and a baby doesn't go into battle. So that was one of the moments where it really kind of shakes the way that when we talk about the incident. And the reason why till today millions and millions of people around the globe still commemorate and mourn this incident, because this is a man which was so dear to the Prophet, you know, this is the Prophet of Islam and his family were so dear to him, yet this is perhaps the most brutal way of killing someone, the most brutal way of you know, attacking someone. And when we read the narrations, they say even after they killed him, the bodies of his companions and him were looted, and he was wearing a ring that they had chopped off the finger just to take off the ring. The bodies were decapitated. It's disgusting brutality against any human being, let alone the family of the Prophet.
Oh my God. Wow. That's really quite barbaric and gruesome to watch that. To see the man actually cutting himself with the sword and to see that huge wound, gaping wound. Clearly he's really damaged himself and all of that blood. It's quite shocking to see that. People actually go to those extremes. Yeah, it's quite mind-blowing. I'm quite, yeah, blown away by that. Wow. It's very extreme, very extreme.
When searching for images relating to Hussein, one is often confronted with very graphical images of bloodletting. Whilst there are many differing opinions on the legitimacy of such acts, our question was, does it take light away from the tragedy of Karbala, and how off-putting can it be to someone unfamiliar with these rituals? The heroic brother of Hussein and his flag-bearer, Al-Abbas, is traditionally mourned on the 7th night of Muharram, a figure highly revered by many for his unfaltering bravery in the Battle of Karbala, his loyalty to his brother Hussein, and for the tragic way in which he was martyred.
The arrows fell on Abu Fadl like if it was raining. An arrow hit the water bag. The water spilled on the floor. Oh Fatima Zahra, please forgive me for reading this musibah. And another arrow landed in his arms. The blood spilled into the other eye.
Michelle had the opportunity to accompany Sheikh Jihad. She wanted to ask him questions that were on her mind.
So can I ask for yourself, who was Hussein and how can he be like a universal leader?
Yeah.
I understand what he stood for. What would you say in your
I would say, if we present Hussein to the world as a paradigm of justice that knows no color, no gender, no divides, no nationalistic patriotism, but rather a man who was willing to sacrifice and give his life and the life of his children and his family member for the betterment of humanity. I think we'll be able to succeed so much in that, to such an extent that a Christian thinker by the name of Antoine Barra, he's a very well-known Christian Eastern thinker from Syria. Right. He said, if we had Hussein, we would have added him to Jesus.
Yes.
And we would have erected a banner in the name of both in order to invite people to the truth. Yes. How beautiful is this statement, you know? Because what this thinker is trying to say, is trying to say that the message is one. You know, Jesus called for love.
Yeah.
Hussein,
and peace, of course.
Absolutely. Hussein never intended or went out or set a foot out from his home to fight.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read that and I was really awestruck in a sense by that, because that's what really, some religions, you know, you have to, they kind of practice their own teachings within their own communities.
Yes.
Whereas this is what I really liked about him. Just finding about him, obviously today, I was very drawn to him. I thought, you know, wow, what a man, what a man he was, you know.
Anyone who reads his story, anyone who reads his struggle, anyone who reads his sacrifice, anyone who reads what he went and endured would fall in love with Hussein.
Yes.
Because he transcended that time zone or time frame or historical point of time to reach the life. Basically what he did, he gave up his life in order to breathe life into others.
Yes.
You know, to breathe dignity, to breathe honor, to breathe principles, you know.
Yes.
And that's what I was referring to when I said we should always become inclusives.
Yes.
You know?
I like that.
And not just live for ourselves. He was the one that suffered the most. you know. Why I say he was the one that suffered the most, not on the basis only that he physically sustained pain, but no, he had to endure all the suffering of everyone that went before him.
Yes.
And everyone was looking forward to him. Like any one of the companions that falls, he would call his name. Any of the family members, his children that fall, they will call for his name. I mean, sometimes you think to yourself, what sort of a heart did this man have? You know, to be able to encompass all this suffering, and you know, and to remain steadfast and continue the fight until the last minute, until he falls himself as well. It's just beyond belief.
It is,
you know, it's just beyond comprehension in any human standard, at least, you know, and in any human tragedy for that matter. Yeah, so yeah, that's why I think the legacy of Hussein will never die.
Yes.
That's the secret of its continuation over the course of time. It's been like 1400 years.
Yes.
You know, and it still withstood the test of time.
The test of time,
you know?
and it seems like each year this seems to be getting stronger,
getting
and
stronger and bigger,
you know,
and
more
you know,
and more people are knowing about this message, and so really him dying, it wasn't.
He
in
may
vain,
have died physically, but he never died morally, spiritually, message-wise, mission-wise, value-wise. No, it's there. You mention Hussein, and the heart will be in swoon towards him. They will love to be in his presence, to respond to his message, to enact his suffering, you know, in any way, shape or form that is available to them.
One thing that really struck me about today, and it's all affected me and touched me very deeply, but one thing I haven't been able to get my head around today is this, in the Muslim, not everybody's doing that, there's a minority, but of the bloodletting.
Yes.
And I've watched some videos of this today, and it's completely kind of overwhelmed me. I cannot believe that people still carry this on to such an extreme extent. What are your views on this?
The hierarchy within at least within the Shia school of thought, if I may use that example, have always expressed very vocally the fact that what I said earlier, that if bloodletting in a public scene will undermine how people perceive the faith, then you should not practice it at all in a public setup, because that will jeopardize the beauty of the message. If the beauty of the message of Imam Hussein, for example, is going to be jeopardized on the basis that an onlooker may not understand what is going on, or he may perceive that this action is actually something that the Muslim will enact against others, you know, in a non-grieving situation, right? That surely will give a negative image about faith, or will undermine the actual message and the beauty of the principles and the values that Imam Hussein carried forward for not only for Muslim per se, by the way, it's for humanity.
Yes,
I mean,
indeed,
when you get someone like Gandhi saying, I learned how to win by being oppressed. That is an amazing, powerful message that he learned from Hussein. He said, I learned that from Hussein. So that gives you the foundation that Imam Hussein really message transcended time and space and place and color and gender and background and religion. It was like a mission of reform for one and all.
I could see how, for instance, say the media could jump on this and absolutely turn it upside down.
100%.
Absolutely. So again, to kind of deviate away from the message, what he was promoting, you know, because for me, I was told a little bit about this, but when I actually saw it from my own eyes, I was quite horrified by that. And I've still got that image in my head actually, to think, whoa, that's very extreme to go and promote this, you know, by all means promote your faith.
Very gory, you know, you see all this blood coming out. And,
On the 8th night, in some traditions, the tragedy of Al-Qasim, the young nephew of Hussein, is narrated. The 14-year-old sought to fight for his uncle, but his plea was turned down. Hussein only accepted when he saw the written will of his brother Hassan, which stated that his son Qasim should support his uncle on the day of Ashura.
The weeping is something that even to this day I can still remember very clearly. I can hear it in the back of my head. The weeping on behalf of the people around me, it was clearly a very emotional moment for them. And also seeing as the room was separated between genders, but you could hear most certainly that some of the weeping was coming from very far side of the hall. So that's how I know that the energy that I was experiencing in my small part was being replicated across the room by all different people who, even though they were disconnected, they were all feeling the very same sensation at that moment. And it's interesting to be in a place where you're part of a wider energy. And that's something that I felt repeatedly through my whole experience learning about the story of Hussein, is that the emotions that he provokes and that his story have provoked in people, they make people feel the same energy and have the same emotions, and that's something that ripples out for anybody that's present and knows his story. I think that's one of the greatest parts about his legacy that I've learned. Even though I had knowledge of the reenactment prior to it happening, I'd heard a part of the story of Qasim from the people involved with the program, and also just from friends previously in my life. However, seeing the reenactment was a completely different situation, mainly for the emotions they provoked in the people around me. At that time, when I was witnessing it, I was very much in the center of the lecture hall. So I was surrounded by people who obviously knew about it and cared about the story in a very deep, profound way. But even myself, just seeing it and the audible, the sounds that were being made in coordination with the story, that provoked an emotion in me. It made me think about the words that I had heard. It made me interpret them in a different way, and to really feel them and understand what it must have been like for him to be in that particular situation. The reenactment of the moment where Qasim takes the parchment from his mother that says that he should go and help his uncle Hussein when nobody is there to help him. And then again there was the telling of the story of, unfortunately, how Qasim passed away. Again, this triggered grieving on behalf of the people that were in the audience.
On the same night, we took Yavin to a traditional program organized by Iraqi men.
I remember when we walked into the hall, we'd just recently returned from another event, and the hall was packed, and it was evident that there was a buzz of people. Even from before, before entering, we saw that there were shoes all lined up outside. Everybody had taken them off, and you could just tell that there was going to be a vast amount of people in there. We were all in the center of the hall, and people began walking around with swords, and they were chanting, and progressively they got faster and faster, and more people were added and more swords. And whilst this may seem something that, it's not something that's regular, it's not something that you see every day, however, it was very non-threatening. You could tell that the people were doing this with a passion for something that they really believed in, and they were obviously connecting to the story that they'd been hearing over the last couple of days, and a story that the vast majority of them probably knew off by heart. And it was really the raw emotions that were driving them.
Drums are beaten and swords are drawn in an act of a mock battle. Traditionally, men take part in an exhibition of allegiance and bravery to demonstrate their affection to Hussein. They chant and wail the name of Haydar, the father of Hussein, in an act of defiance against tyranny.
These people were saying that in their time now, had they been able to, they would have gone and fought for Hussein, because at the time nobody was there to protect him. People in the center as well, they were contributing in their own way. There was a lot of chanting going on. Everybody seemed to know the words to the chants that they were saying, and different chants erupted. You could tell slightly Again, as I was talking to the people that were around me, the people from different backgrounds, from different countries, they were all contributing in their own way. Some of them had different chants, and from the chants, some of them were related to the country that they were coming from, etc. And that made it a very, in the same way, whilst everyone in the room was sharing, and they were giving their own energy all towards the greater celebration, but a lot of the people, you could tell that they had a very personal tie to the things that they were saying. And I feel that even upon somebody like me, who isn't necessarily from that background, I could feel that the energy being transmitted was very high and very genuine. And that's what made it a special moment to be able to witness as well.
It is the 10th of Muharram today, marking the death anniversary of Hussein and his family. The community gathers to recite the full tragedy of the events that took place in Karbala. It is the climax of the remembrance of Hussein's tragedy.
The mood was very somber and very sad. Everyone was dressed in black. And I remember feeling, it felt very different compared to the previous nights that I'd been there.
So in the morning we went to the mosque where we were told about the ordeal of Imam Hussein. Some of the moments that were described are actually quite troubling. Hearing the very vivid descriptions of the things that happened to him and his companions, especially the things to the young children, I found those to be quite horrific. But I understand that the story has to be told like that to accurately reflect what happened. And it's right that people know exactly what happened because it helps to spread this message.
I feel there was obviously lots of tensions in the room. It was very emotional. But the story again, which was being portrayed, for me personally, to witness that again, that was very overwhelming. With the women, especially the women crying, but to actually witness the men seeing that emotion, that was quite overpowering. And that did actually make me feel very emotional, especially listening to the story being recounted again.
There was flagellation going on, some people were hitting their faces and things like that. People were evidently very visibly distressed by what was going on, but with good reason. I mean, it was the description of a very horrific event. At the time, I was thinking about the innocence of children, because the children were, as everyone was, they were all companions of Imam Hussein, but children, obviously, in the place of battle, I feel that there's no room for children, and the fact that they had to suffer the tragedies as if they were adults, it really deeply saddened me and touched me, and that's why I was looking down and almost paying my respects in a sense, but also just shaking my head was as to how could somebody do something so horrific to somebody that's so young, that hasn't reached the age of reason.
Whilst the lecture was being recited, there were several moments that touched me in quite a deep way. And this is very much to do with the description, the amount of description that was put into telling the stories. Some of them became very real to me, and you could almost feel like you were present in the scenes there themselves. There's one particular moment that I remember when they were describing the killing of a 6-month-old baby. And I guess even from an outside perspective, it was quite visible that I was touched by this. And this is really because I could feel the helplessness. And that's something that it moved me in a way that I wasn't quite prepared for, even though I knew that the story was going to be one that was filled with tragedies, unfortunately. But that was something that I wasn't quite prepared for. The level of detail that they went into, it made me feel quite vulnerable in the same sense that I guess that baby would have felt in that particular instance. So that's something that touched me quite emotionally.
He then asked for his baby son to bid farewell to him. Zainab brought him his son Abdullah, whose mother was Rabia. He sat him on his lap, kissing him and saying, "Distanced are these people from the mercy of Allah, when your grandfather Al-Mustafa will be their enemy." He then carried him and brought him to the enemies, asking them for water. That is when Harmal ibn Kahil al-Asadi shot him with a three-headed arrow that pierced his neck while on the hands of his father. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam filled his hand with the blood of the baby and threw it to the skies, and not a single drop of it came back. He came back to the tent of Zainab. He then came back to the tent of Zainab alayha salam, carrying his slaughtered baby. He did not take him back to his mother Rabi'ah, for surely it would have been unbearable for her to see her son slain in such a manner. Zainab alayha salam came out of her tent and saw the baby slain from one end of the neck to the other, and the arrow was still in his throat, for his father couldn't remove it. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam then dismounted from his horse and dug a grave for the baby with the end of his sword and buried him covered in his blood. He then prayed over his slaughtered baby.
You know, how can you not respond to that? How can you not be emotional to that? You know, children are innocent, and that was literally like a baby. That was 6 months old. So when I was listening again to that story, that really got me choked, and that made me really emotional. I could literally cry now just thinking about that. I mean, imagine actually witnessing that. You know, it's barbaric, it's disgusting, it should never have happened in my belief. Yeah, it's really, really sad. It made me very, very emotional, so I can really relate to how that would happen, how that would feel. It's awful.
The enemies then attacked Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and his thirst became very severe, so he headed towards the Euphrates, attacking the 4,000 men army headed by Amr ibn al-Hajjaj. He dispersed them from the river and entered with his horse into the river. Imam Hussein told his horse, "You are thirsty and so am I. I will not drink until you do. Allah, Allah, Ya Aba Abdullah." The horse raised his head as if it understood what the Imam said. When Imam Hussein put his hands into the river to drink from the water, he heard a man saying, "You are enjoying the water while your sanctity has been attacked." He then threw the water from his hands and immediately headed back to the camp.
So the melody with which it was told, it made it, it kind of encapsulates you. So whilst you realize that you're in that room and that you're surrounded by other individuals, however, it's a very introspective experience. It's almost as if the narrator is only speaking to you and you only, and that the words are only being transmitted to you. So all the while there is a buzz around you it makes you very aware that you're in a room full of people, even though everyone's being silent and everyone's having their own moment. But the paradox is that you do almost feel alone. In that it's just this voice talking to you and telling you the story, and you really go through every single emotion. You really feel all the lows, and you feel how every single event, it helps you to really put yourself in that space, in that headspace, and even in a sense you start to feel some of the things physically, maybe not the pain, but when something particularly tragic happens in the story, you really match that. You can feel the sensations as if something tragic were happening in your life at the very same time. And that's something that really remained with me, both in the immediate aftermath of the event, but also going forward after the whole experience was concluded.
Abdullah, the son of Imam al-Hassan, the grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, who was 11 years old, saw his uncle being surrounded by the enemies. He ran towards his uncle, and Zainab tried to stop him, but he ran from her. He came to his uncle, Bahr ibn Ka'b, tried his uncle Imam al-Hussein with his sword, but the boy yelled at him saying, Ya ibn al-Khabitha, atadrib ammi? Oh, son of the wicked woman, are you hitting my uncle? Bahr then hit the boy with his sword, and the boy used his arm for protection, but it was cut. Abdullah then cried, Uncle, they have cut off my arm. Uncle, they have cut off my arm. And he fell onto the chest of Imam Hussein. Imam al-Hussein in his state hugged his nephew saying, Ya ibn akhi, isbir ala ma nazala bik. Oh my nephew, be patient on what has happened to you and expect blessings from this, for surely Allah the Exalted will make you keep you with your virtuous ancestors.
When I was hearing the stories of how Hussein reacted to the situations that he was in, it did make me think of how resilient somebody can be, how principled an individual can be, and in a sense, it made me feel emboldened. Not in that particular instance, because I was obviously hearing a story that was quite tragic, but it made me think, that there are times when in the face of adversity and in the face of travesty, somebody could be this bold, and that it kind of gives you the confidence that you too should stand up for what you believe in and stand up for the things that are important to you.
Harmal ibn Kahil al-Asadi then shot the boy with an arrow that slaughtered him while he was on his uncle's chest. Imam al-Hussein remained lying on the ground, and if they wished to kill him, they would have done so. But every tribe passes the task to another, disliking to kill him itself. Shimr then shouted, Why are you standing? What are you waiting for? The man is overwhelmed with arrows and spears. Go and attack him and finish him. Zar'at ibn Sharik hit him on his left shoulder. Al-Hasin then shot him in his mouth. Another one hit him on his shoulder near his neck. Then came Sinan ibn Anas that shot him on his shoulder and on his chest, and then shot him with another arrow in his neck. Hilal ibn Nafi' says, I was standing next to Hussein as he was dying. By Allah, I never saw one covered with his blood, yet with a face shining with light and better looking than him. The light of his face kept me busy from thinking about killing him. At that point, Imam al-Hussein asked for some water, but they refused to give him any. A man said to him, you will not taste water until you get to the hellfire and taste its boiling heat. Imam al-Hussein replied, I go to the hellfire, rather I will go to my grandfather, the messenger of Allah. I will complain to him about what was committed. They all became angry, as if Allah did not keep any mercy in any of their heart.
As part of the 10th day commemorations, a peaceful protest is held every year in the name of Hussein, as a way of reminding people that the message of Hussein will never be forgotten, and that Muslims do not stand for terror, as they understand what it feels like to be oppressed.
I'm just amazed at how many people have actually turned out for the march, and how peaceful and how loving, just the unity that everybody has. It's a really great atmosphere.
I thought the procession was beautiful. It was a coming together of different people. You saw many different nationalities represented.
During the march, one of the most interesting things about the march for me was the way that people really were very proud of connecting the story of Hussein with some of the events that the world has been going through in the 21st century. So a lot of people were drawing upon examples of what had happened to Hussein and some of the accusations and the misrepresentation of Muslims that have happened in recent times. And there was a lot of educating going on. Many of the people were carrying placards.
From the outside looking in, it clearly states what it's about. You can see all of the banners, you know, saying like Islam, you know, represents peace. You know, there's nothing here scary. It's not ISIS, it's not anything like that. It's purely like a peace protest. It's spreading that message, and every year it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And you know, it is a universal message that needs to be told. And enabling this march, it's not only just, you know, having everybody come together for that. It's spreading that message, and that's exactly what Hussein actually stood for.
On an emotional level, you could tell that they were doing this out of their love for Hussein, and it made me see the deep appreciation that these people had for that individual, that they really tried to draw upon the stories that he told all those centuries ago and match them up with what's going on in the modern day. That wouldn't happen if that was a character that they felt flippantly about, or that didn't have that level of importance to them. So it was very evident that there was deep-seated emotions. Being part of a movement, going down somewhere like the central London and then culminating on Downing Street, that's something is very moving. It's not something that you do every single day, and the fact that you're doing it for a positive cause, spreading a message that can embolden other people and that can help them fight against tyranny and oppression, that again, it makes a certain rise in you. The road is long, but at the same time you think, well, what's that compared to what Hussein had gone through when he was on his own journeys? It's really nothing. So it makes you almost eager and glad to be walking, and proud also to be presenting such a positive message and to be part of something like that.
Walking to the march, as you know, walking along, I can see there's lots of people standing by the side of the roads in their cars. They're stopping and they're actually taking pictures on their camera phones. They're videoing that and they're smiling. So the faces I've seen, you can't see any confusion here. You know, they can see it's a peaceful rally, it's a peaceful protest. Otherwise, I don't feel people would be standing there. They would look, there'd be a shock of, you know, look of shock or horror or even confusion on their faces, but it's not. So I think it, you know, it does show what it is. It's peaceful.
There was a large number of people, and they were walking down some of the main, most iconic roads in London. And I feel that if you see that in a language that you don't understand, especially given the current geopolitical climate and what the media like to portray Islam as a religion of hatred, etc., I feel that it may be very confusing for somebody just to come across that coming down some of the main streets in London. Fortunately, there were a lot of people that were handing out leaflets, and I think that a lot of the people that were on the march were very willing to talk to the bystanders. So if you had a question, if you were forthcoming enough to seek knowledge, then you would have understood what it was all about, and the peace and the message that was being propagated was one of positivity and fighting oppression and doing good for the world.
يا حسين